Okay, so we're really diving deep today into influencer marketing and trying to figure out, does influencer size really actually translate to sales?
Yeah.
And this is something that I think a lot of marketers are thinking about. And honestly, I'm right there with you.
Absolutely.
Like everyone's chasing those big time influencers with the millions of followers.
Sure.
But is that really where the magic happens?
Well, and that's the million-dollar question, right?
Yeah.
And what's so fascinating about this research paper you sent over revenue generation through influencer marketing by Beichert, Beryl, Goldenberg, and Lance is that they actually go beyond just kind of the hype.
Right.
And really dig into the data and hard revenue data.
Yes.
So forget vanity metrics. We're talking about the bottom line. How much money are brands actually making from these collaborations?
Right, because anyone can rack up likes and shares, but are people actually opening their wallets based on those recommendations?
Exactly.
This paper claims to have the answer.
They do.
And get this, they use this massive data set from a major European fashion brand.
Wow.
Tracking almost 2 million purchases.
What's a lot of data?
It's huge.
Yeah.
Okay.
So what they found actually really turns traditional thinking on its head.
Okay.
The study indicates that nano-influencers,
Okay.
so those with smaller, highly engaged followings, consistently outperform the macro-influencers.
Really?
Sometimes by incredible margins.
Wow.
We're talking up to 114 times higher returns on investment.
Okay, hold on.
And so
114 times.
Yeah.
Okay, now I'm kicking myself for not sending them a fruit basket before this episode.
No.
Seriously, though, that's a game changer for marketers.
Huge.
So spill the tea. Why are these nano-influencers so effective? What's their secret sauce?
Well, it all boils down to authenticity and connection,
Okay.
which, sounds obvious.
Sure.
But the research really shows how powerful those factors are when it comes to influencing purchasing decisions.
Yeah.
You see, nano-influencers have typically built their following very organically, often around a very specific niche or passion.
So it's less about a celebrity endorsement and more about genuine enthusiasm, which their followers pick up on.
Exactly. And that translates into a level of trust that you just don't see with these larger-than-life influencers.
Okay.
When a nano-influencer recommends something, it feels as a trusted friend giving you a hot tip.
Yeah.
Not a paid advertisement.
It's like that friend who's always like introducing you to amazing new music or that hitting gem restaurant.
Yes.
You just trust their judgment implicitly.
Absolutely.
So how did the researchers actually measure this trust factor?
Yeah.
Did they just ask people, hey, how much do you like this influencer?
That's the really interesting part is they went beyond the self-reported data.
Okay.
And they actually analyzed the language used in the comment sections.
Interesting.
Of both nano and macro influencer posts.
Okay.
And what they found is fascinating.
What'd they find?
Followers of nano influencers used much more emotional, personal language.
Interesting.
Expressing genuine excitement and connection with the content.
So it's not just about what's being said, but how it's being said.
Right.
And more importantly, how people are responding.
Exactly.
Okay.
It suggests a depth of engagement and a sense of community that you just don't find on a larger scale.
Okay, but I have to ask, what about reach?
Sure.
I mean, sure, these nano-influencers have a super engaged audience, but it's still a smaller pool of people compared to someone with millions of followers, right?
Right. That's a great point. And that's something the researchers were very aware of.
Okay.
They factored in the overall reach of both nano and macro influencers.
Okay.
Taking into account the sheer number of people who saw those sponsored posts.
Okay.
And even when they adjusted for reach, guess what?
Don't tell me the little guys still came out on top.
They did. Even when considering the broader audience, those nano-influencers still drove significantly higher returns.
Wow.
Yeah, it's like the old saying.
What's that?
It's not about the size of the pond, but the quality of the fish.
Okay. I love that analogy.
Right.
So we're seeing a clear pattern here. Smaller, more engaged audiences equal bigger wins for brands.
Yeah.
But I'm curious, was this just a fluke?
Right.
Maybe this particular fashion brand just happened to stumble upon a gold mine of nano-influencers. I want to see if this holds true across different industries and brands.
And that's where it gets even more interesting.
Yeah.
The researchers weren't content with just one data set. They actually ran 3 separate field studies.
Wow. Okay.
This time branching out to beauty brands as well.
Okay.
And guess what?
Don't keep me in suspense. Tell me the nano-influencers reign supreme again.
They did.
Yeah.
Across the board, those smaller influencers continued to drive higher sales.
Yeah.
But here's the kicker in one of those field studies.
Okay.
They gave the influencers more creative freedom.
Oh, interesting.
So instead of being locked into very strict brand guidelines, they were allowed to kind of tailor the sponsored posts to their own personal style and approach.
So even when you take away some of the control, let the nano-influencers do their thing.
Exactly.
They still deliver.
They still deliver.
That speaks volumes about the power of genuine influence.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Think about it from the consumer's perspective.
Yeah.
You follow someone online because you resonate with their style, their voice, their values.
Right.
When they recommend something, it feels like a natural extension of who they are. Not just a paid advertisement. They're contractually obligated to post.
It's that walking the walk factor.
Exactly.
They're not just talking about a product, they're living it.
Right.
And their audience can tell the difference.
They can tell. And that authenticity shines through.
Okay.
Making their recommendations that much more persuasive. Now, it's important to acknowledge that this research primarily focused on driving immediate sales.
Okay.
Clicks, conversions, that kind of thing.
Right. Which makes sense given the direct-to-consumer context of these fashion and beauty brands.
Right.
But it does make you wonder, what about the long game?
Exactly. What about building brand awareness? Fostering long-term customer loyalty?
Right.
Those less tangible but equally important marketing goals?
Yeah.
Could macro influencers still have a role to play there?
Interesting. So maybe it's not an either-or situation.
Perhaps the smartest approach is to leverage the strengths of both types of influencers.
That's an excellent point.
Yeah.
A hybrid strategy, if you will.
Okay.
Use the macro influencers to cast a wide net, build brand awareness on a larger scale, and then leverage the power of those nano-influencers to really drive those conversions, to nurture those deeper connections that lead to loyal customers.
Okay, now we're talking a 1-2 punch of influencer marketing genius.
There you go.
But that does raise a question, and I think this is something a lot of our listeners are probably wondering right now. What about different product categories?
Sure.
This research focused on fashion and beauty, which are very visual, very much about personal style and identity.
Right.
But what about, say, tech gadgets?
Or financial services. Yeah, those categories feel different, don't they? Like, I'm probably not going to buy a new laptop just because my favorite, like, fashion influencer recommends it.
Right.
I'd want, like, expert reviews, tech specs, that kind of thing.
Exactly. And that raises a fascinating question. Does the ideal influencer profile actually change depending on the product or service being marketed? In some cases, maybe expertise and credibility become even more important than just personal connection.
It's like, I trust my friend who's a total foodie to recommend an amazing new restaurant.
Right.
But if I'm looking for financial advice, I'm probably calling up a financial advisor, not texting my buddy.
Precisely. And that nuance is key.
Yeah.
This research gives us a fantastic starting point
Okay.
for understanding the power of nano-influencers, but it also opens up a whole new avenue for exploration. How do these dynamics play out across different product categories?
Right.
Are there industries where macro influencers still hold the edge?
That's a question worth pondering. And you know what? We love leaving our listeners with a little something to chew on.
Right. Always more to learn.
Yeah, that's what makes this field so exciting.
Exactly. It's constantly evolving.
Keeps us on our toes.
It does.
So to our listener out there, if you're like neck deep in a marketing strategy session armed with this research, remember sometimes the most impactful voices are the ones speaking to a smaller, more invested crowd?
Absolutely.
Until next time, keep those thinking caps on.